One of our first featured modeler tonight is Nick Santos of Nick's Trains. And Nick is going to do a soldering demonstration. He's been on our show before, and when he was on the last time, he was talking about how he was doing his soldering, and he had some questions that were asked to him. So we invited him back to talk to us a little bit more about his soldering technique. So Nick, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I'll pick up the screen share and get going here, if I'm lucky. Have you people got the screen?
Yes.
Okay. We'll get it started here without noise. What I want to do tonight is show you the same thing over and over and over and over again. So if you get really bored and go to sleep, it's fine. If you're going to snore, put it on mute and we'll all be fine. This is essentially the soldering unit that I've used for years. I've done it. I've done a lot of different things with it. There are a few things that I'll show you tonight that I haven't done with the Weller. The nice thing about it is I run it down to about 4. And when I'm doing some fine soldering, this is one of my decoder buddies. The white wire from the power pack needs a place to go. And I just wasn't familiar with stay alives. Watch right there right now. See that right there? It just went totally to a liquid state, and the soldering joint is done. So the soldering joints that we're going to show you over and over and over again start with a little bit of flux. This I'm doing with just a 10 thousandths wire and a pin vise and a little bit of chip quick soldering flux. Won't solder all these, but I will just touch a little bit of solder to each one. The soldering, the flux, even though we're going to do a remelt here, just make sure that the joint is going to happen nicely. What I'm going to do is I've got the soldering iron warmed up now, and I'm going to take an 0603, a small SMD resistor in a pair of tweezers. I'm just going to make a puddle out of that piece of solder and set the resistor in it. And that was all it needs to hold it. Now I'm in good shape. I'll do the same thing for you again. Just take a resistor, make a puddle, and as soon as that's liquid, then I can flip that resistor down into the melted solder, and it'll hold it. Now I've got to get the other side. To do that, I'll turn the board around and go at it the same way, or quite similarly. Right now, the right-hand side of those resistors is a little bit tall. It's kind of up on the mound of solder. So what I'm going to have to do, I guess I'm going down through the whole row here tonight. Is just set those in, and you can see it happens pretty quickly. You can move around, move the resistor around a little bit. As soon as it's liquid and where I want it, the job is done. The heat goes away, and the solder comes right back into a solid state and will hold things. So you can see, for as small as those are, they're pretty easy to work with. The thing that's showing here also is when you're working with a printed circuit board, if you've got a soldering iron that's about the right temperature, you can really leave that heat on the pad for a while. On the other hand, you want to be really careful about what I just said. If your soldering iron is too hot, then that'll burn the pad. There are two things that'll lift a pad off the printed circuit board. One is acid flux, and the second thing is is too much heat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to solder the other side. You can see I'm pushing down on the resistor, and it's just going down into into the solder. That clicks in, and then I just relieve the strain on the back side with the soldering iron. Just reflow that back end. Really saw that one go down, and this one will really drop down in too, and then relieve the strain on the back side of the other end. Not that you'll ever have to do this, but it's just, it was a nice way to show that you can solder on printed circuit boards. You can solder really small parts, and it all turns out to be the same. In a couple of minutes, you'll see me doing very similar things with wires. When I first started getting the decoder buddies, my first set of 1,000 of the small connector boards, which you'll see in a second, were all wrong. So I had to order new parts, and then what I did was I built a jig to hold the parts so that I could solder them. Holding a part steady is almost as tough, if not tougher, than actually soldering the part. Getting it so it's in a condition that you can deal with it. So that's the small connector board, and it's just being held by one of the connectors. Sometimes they go on easy, and sometimes they don't. There we go. The next thing that goes on is the connector itself, and you can see that would be sitting on that board just like it would on the decoder buddy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use solder this time. I'm going to warm the part up that I want to solder, and I'll just put a trace of solder on each one of those legs, and that's all there is to it. Just warm it up, get the solder in, let it flow, and get out of there. That's what I use is Chip Quick. It isn't cheap, and I've noticed on Amazon you can start to get it in the tubes. They have smaller tubes now. You can get 5 for an amount. I'm going to do this the way I don't like to do it, and then I'm going to do it the way I like to do it. This is something that's worked really well for me. Taking either that 10 thousandths wire in the pin vise or a toothpick or something, just to get a little bit of solder on the pad. This works really well for me in all cases. You don't need a lot of flux, just a little bit. I've seen people just dab on an awful lot of solder or an awful lot of flux, and you end up using a lot, and a lot of it will go away. In a second, I'll figure out which pads I want to tin and which pads I don't want to tin. After I get them tinned, the actual job of soldering them will be soldering the wires on will be quite easy. This is a way to do some soldering, just to take a little bit of solder and get it on the soldering iron, and then transfer it to the pad. I'm not awfully happy with that method. As you can see, I'm kind of fumbling with it. There's a little bit of solder, less solder, and then I go back and get some solder from the top joint and bring it over, and you know, it's a little bit tedious. If I'm into doing a lot of soldering pads, there's a better way. I'll show that to you in just a second, the way I really like to go. I'm just grabbing a little bit of solder from places where I think there's a little bit too much and bringing it over. Again, the temperature of that iron. People come back and say, Nick, your decoder buddies pads are pulling up off the printed circuit board, and the reason for that is that the soldering the soldering gun is too hot. this is the way I really like to put a little bit of solder onto the pads, just like I did the connector boards. And this, if this is all tinned up and ready to go, then the next step will be to get the wires that I want to attach to it. Get them trimmed to length. People ask me what kind of wire strippers I like, and I've had one set of wire strippers since I was in high school, and I just got a second pair recently, and they're just exactly the same. I've used them for 14 gauge wire, 12 gauge wire, and on the LEDs here, that's got to be 32, 34 gauge wire, maybe 36 gauge wire. I'm going to cut it to length, just flush cutters, dikes, whatever. The cut isn't the big deal. The splice is the big deal. I'm going to measure them both the same length. And shortly I'll come in with the wire strippers. And you can see they're Kleins. They don't have to be named Klein. That, you know, Klein buys them from. I don't think Klein makes them. I bet they're made in China. I bet they're made away. And just to pull that piece of insulation away, you can use your fingernails. On this is silicone wire. It's a little bit tougher. I need just that little bit more mechanical strength to get the insulation off. Again, it'd be nice when you're soldering to have 3 arms and 3 sets of hands, but since I was only born with 2, any way I can get to hold the wire or keep it firm or solid is handy. Now you're saying, boy, he's doing that right on his desktop. I am, but that's a silicone pad, and that just works really well. I've had very good luck with the silicone pads. Desktops stay nice, and if I really need to push down and make a connection or make a joint or hold something, it's not going to cause any destruction to the work surface. This solder is fairly large diameter. It has flux in the middle of it, so I haven't tinned the end of that. I've had good luck with the rosin core solder. I like Kester, and I think I use 0.3 of a millimeter or 30 thousandths, the finest solder I can get on most of the time. Finest diameter solder. So now you can see I'm going to kind of struggle with this a little bit because I wasn't smart and didn't get it nailed down tight. Just get that solder to flow a little bit and it'll stay. Same thing here happens again. This is called reflow, and all I'm doing is taking the solder that's on the end of the wire and the solder that's on the pad, and just melting the two together. That's the only thing that's happening there. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for that to just go liquid. It's solid now, it's liquid. Take the heat away, let it go back and freeze, and those two joints are done. That's all there is to it. if I'm doing it for people out in the way, I might go in there with a Q-tip and a little bit of isopropanol, 70, what is it, 71% IPA. If you can get, I saw some at Walmart today. Must be they're not using quite as much of it on a Q-tip, and that'll clean that flux off pretty nicely and easily. Try the other pair now. Those holes are handy. It helps me route wire through an installation. The tweezers were inexpensive. I got those from eBay out of China, and I got another pair of those, and they were a little bit less expensive, but they're very flimsy. This pair was a lot more sturdy than the first pair I got. So we'll go through the same game one more time again. First, we'll cut the wires to a good length. Next, we'll strip the wires. I'm trying to set that up so that you can see when you get that wire in that bird mouth there, it just bends a little bit, and when you see the bend, you pull it away, and you get a good strip. It's a little bit too fine to feel. It's a visual thing. The red one might be easier to see. Decided to tin these. They're a little bit long to go on those pads. I can see that right now. It's probably why I decided to tin them. We'll just come in with a solder. I think this one is a pretty good demonstration of how that solder goes right up that piece of wire. Zip. If you want to pull the rest of it off, you can pull it off with your iron. Now I'll probably take a look at it and say something profound like, wow, that's too long. I'm going to have too much bare wire sticking around here. Let's see if this is the one that was or not. I don't want that insulation outside of the printed circuit board. So what I'll do is I'll just clip a little bit of the end off and measure it against the pad length. Then I'll fight with it because I didn't pin it down very hard. I'll get frustrated with it and hold the board down with a soldering iron. One thing I should have found is they have blue, what they call blue tack. That's very handy, and I put a little bit of blue tack under that, and just put the printed circuit board down on that blue tack. It would have held that printed circuit board a lot more stable. To spend this much time on it for a demonstration is about the last time I'll play that game. Now I'll unsolder this one by accident. Oh, nice going, Nick. So am I done in? Nope. That's not a problem electronically. We get a good joint there. Then we'll come back in. And this one that I untacked, as long as I get it on the right pad, it'll reflow and go back in. So that little mistake right there could also double as a thought or a way to recover from a mistake. If I put that wire on the wrong pad and saw it, then I'd be happy that I saw it and go in and resolder it again. Just put the soldering iron on it, take the wire away, and then reflow it to where it needed to be. Actually, that was a very nice demonstration of that was the one that I was thinking about and talking about. That I've taken two wires, twisted them together. On this particular locomotive, the front and the back wires from the trucks, I decided just to put them on one pad, combine them and put them on one pad. So that's what we're doing here. It's a fairly large wire to go on that pad, but again, just make it liquid, let it solidify, and job's done. Once you get a couple wires on it, stabilizes that a little bit. It's not such a moving target. Again, not very much wire hanging off here to get into trouble. While we're on motor wires, what I've done is I've just I didn't tin that. I had plenty of solder there. I just fluxed the wire. The solder will flow up into the copper. And make a good joint. That's all there is to that. Not happy with that. I'll come back in again in a second and see all the distance right here. It's too much wire hanging around. As a matter of fact, way too much wire. Guess maybe what I'll do is I'll chop it off a little bit and come back in so that this distance here isn't showing an awful lot of bare wire. And again, you can see I'm soldering and resoldering and being particular about what I want it to look like and what I want it to be at the very end. The melt, the freeze, and the walk away. On speakers, JT speakers, we know JT. He says don't use flux on his speakers. I know there's a little bit of flux in that solder, but for the amount that I put on there, I think both of us would be comfortable. What we're going to want to do is reflow on these. We're going to want a fairly quick joint to happen here. There's a lot of mechanical stuff happening inside those speakers, and I just don't want to spend an awful lot of time with an awful lot of heat on those joints. So now I've got a tinned wire and a tinned connection. And all I'll do is just warm that up till that solder flows and make the joint. There, it's getting there. I don't want it too far toward the bottom, because that's a metal cap on the speaker. Just a little bit more solder for a little bit more mechanical strength, and that one will be done. Take a little bit of solder onto a tinned onto a fluxed wire. We'll do the same thing here on the other side. If anybody's wondering, that's a Weller. I guess they go about $70, and the tip I use is an ST7, Sierra Tango 7. It's the finest tip that they have, and I have it at about 4 on a scale of 5. There you can see some 14 gauge wire and that old pair of Klein wire strippers again. This is pretty tough wire. It's I used it throughout my layout. I got it at Home Depot. The price was right, and I had a little bit of stretch here, so we'll do up a joint like if you were going to use it for power bus on your DCC layout, or even a power bus for your DC layout. Wouldn't be a bad idea to go this heavy right out of the box in case you ever wanted to go over to DCC. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a joint to that would show, I could have cut that, but it's being lazy. What we're going to do is we're going to make a joint for a power feed up to the track. See if that bends just a little bit, then it'll peel off pretty easily. What I do is I give that a single wrap, maybe a wrap and a half. Pull that insulation back just a little bit, and that's mechanical. That would do it until that joint oxidized. I smartened up this time and got something to hold that wire with, so it's not going to go all over the place on me. And we'll put a little bit of flux on there. And ordinarily, I would have run that soldering iron with they have a flatter tip if I was going to be doing a lot of this, but I still got that fine tip on there, and it's still at 4. So there's not an awful lot of heat going in there, and that's good 14 gauge wire. So what we'll do is we'll start warming that up. Use just a little bit of solder in there to help the heat transfer into the copper. Once it starts heating up, I can start feeding the solder in, and now I think I'll probably go back and just make sure that that's all flowed nicely in there. It's all liquid and made a good joint. You could see it. You could see it go out. You'd see it go out through here a second ago. Um, that it was liquid. It's a nice shiny joint, so that'll go forever. Now I was a little, not lazy, but a little bit lazy. This is stranded. This is stranded aluminum wire, I think, and I just offset my joints. There's nothing better than air for an insulator, and I don't have any kids, and I don't let my cat in the cellar, so she's not going to go out and rub those together. So that's those are the way I did feeders into the layout. Now, if I had a cup of coffee, I'd give it to you. Probably you aren't going to be doing this. That is an 0201 LED. I think it's 1.5 by 2.5 thousandths, and that's 40 gauge wire. And what I'm going to do is just cut to tin that. I stick it into molten solder. That's magnet wire. You can see the LED there. It has color coding here. So this is the positive side and this is the negative side. I'm going to hold it down. And this is going to look fairly familiar, other than it's just a different package and it's a little bit different size. There's the 10 thousandths wire this time with a little bit of flux on it. And I got to be honest with you, I had to buy a different soldering iron. I couldn't use the Weller on this one. But the game is just to get a good flow there. Maybe test your joint. Oh, that one didn't work. So what I'll do is I'll straighten that out, re-tin it, and go back in with a little bit more solder. If at first you don't succeed, flux is your friend and go in again. So I've grabbed just a little bit of flux, a little bit of solder on the end of that iron. The trick is to make my hand stable enough so that I can make this joint without pulling it apart on the go. And that's going to be a good joint. Bingo. There you go. So we'll turn it around and do the other side, and then we'll be done with this one. The first one of these took me about 6 hours. I've got it down to a little bit less than that now, but it's far from perfect. Again, jigging and positioning is 80% of the battle with soldering. One of the things that happened nicely as an accident for the decoder buddy was that I could solder the wires, all these wires and this wire. I'll show you how to solder magnet wire to stranded copper here in a second, to the small connector board and keep it away from the frame and keep myself under control so I wasn't rubbing the soldering iron on the styrene plastic. So essentially the tip of the wire was tinned, and the LED was bare, but that's gold surface, so it really takes the solder pretty well. Check it for strength, and off we go. Now, if you decide to get a hold of one of these, or you have magnet wire in general, what I have is a cup of molten solder, and I'll just take the magnet wire and dip it into the molten solder, and that will burn up the insulation. So a piece of LED wire. Never throw the small wires away from the LEDs or anything I'm working with. I've got a small box of wires that are pretty well pre-cut for me, and some of them are even pre-tinned. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tin the end of this wire. I think this one tins off pretty nicely too. Yep. See, it just by capillary action, it worked its way right up that wire. I'm going to take the magnet wire and just wrap it. And this is unstripped. It's just magnet wire, just right off the roll. I'm going to flux it, wrap it around that tinned wire, and the tinning made that stranded wire in my right hand nice and stiff. So I could pull this off. Now the only other thing I've got to do is that's been fluxed. I guess I'm going to flux it again. Pull some flux off my knuckle that I got on there. Come in with a soldering iron. I'm going to hold this one on for a second. And that's going to burn that insulation off that magnet wire. I'm going to cut off the end of that. Magnet wire, just to get it out of the way. Seeing and positioning and jigging is just takes longer than soldering, doesn't it? And now I've ended up with a nice firm and solid joint. What I could do is take cyanoacrylate, a little bit of super glue, or some of that black liquid insulator, and run it over that. Or it's a little bit fine for it's a little bit fine for heat shrink. This is a piece of rail. This is the last thing I'm going to do for you. Something that you're probably going to have to do sooner or later. It's micro-engineering rail. I like to scrape some of that off, although you don't really have to. What I'll do is, and that's that same iron, and it's still at 4. I kind of kicked myself afterwards and said, well, why did you do that, Nick? But you know something, it worked really well, and you can see after I finish up, we will have 2 ties that melt. So I'll take this piece of stiff wire. I like telco wire for my power drops. I can bend it. It'll stay in position when I put it on the bottom of the rail or the side of the rail. This is all tin, so now all I've got to do is reflow that solder on the joint. And bend it to the shape that you want, so that you can drop that right down through a hole in the bottom of or the top of the layout, wherever you are. And that's all there is to that. Oop. Moved it too quickly, so I'll take it in again. Let it stay, let it cool, it's solid, and we got a good joint there. This one I didn't clean off in particular. I just used a little bit of solder. We used the same piece of yellow wire. I desoldered it and I just turned the track over. His track is really good. If you're using Shinohara or Atlas or whoever else's track that hasn't been weathered, that'll take solder with flux equally as well. This will be a good joint. The trick of it is just to get it to just to get a good spot in there that's going to hold. And if I do it on this side here and this side here and turn that back against the wall, you'll never know there was a solder joint on this one. Then just reflow it. Excuse me, the focus on that could have been better, but I think you get the idea. It's nice and warm there. Hold on to it, hold it steady, let it solidify, and off you go. And I think the real coup on this, you know, when I was using Dad's Weller gun, the one with a single light or the two lights out in front, I melted quite a few ties, and this method works pretty well. What I'll do is just scrape the top of that off a little bit so that to be sure I've got a good contact for a train going across, and that's a done deal. So that's about it. The only other thing you don't see here is the wet pad. You see the brass wool. You see the chip quick. You see the roll of, this is pretty solid, pretty thick solder, and the strippers, the flush cutters, and the end of the show. Questions? Oh, actually, I'll wait. We got one more person that wants to present too.
Nick, I thank you so very much. That was fantastic.
Boy, and I got most of the people awake tonight too.
Hey, how about you? Can't beat that.
You're a good audience.